Yeah, I'm probably about to make a lot of people very mad because this is probably considered by many to be the best of the Harry Potter movies. I disagree. Look, I'm a horror nut. You guys know I love my horror stuff, especially when it's in franchises that aren't mainly horror related. But sometimes it goes too far and just doesn't really work for me. And I hate to say it, but even as a kid, Prisoner of Azkaban always did that for me. So, let's talk about it and my very controversial hot take on this movie. What's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the Anime Station. This is your fan and everything animation. Welcome back to Legends of Literature. Welcome to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. You know how I said that this wouldn't drop lower than a 7? Back when I first started the series reviewing Sorcerer slash Philosopher's Stone. Well, this is one of those that drops that low for me. It's a very good movie. I can tell it's a very good movie. It's still enjoyable enough. But compared to most of this franchise, this one to me is pretty lousy. But then again, I'm judging it by the standards of the rest of this entire series. Not to mention the two amazing films that followed right before it. So, yeah, this one may or may not get me shot in my comment section, but yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say it. Prisoner of Azkaban's overrated to an obnoxious degree. I can understand why some people like it. I do like the style change. I do like the new cinematography, the new costume design. Alfonso Cuarón is a very good director and he does a good job. The cast is still great, and I especially love the additions of Remus Lupin and Sirius Black. But man, story-wise, this movie is a mess. Like, it starts out great, and then as it gets further and further along, especially when it throws in freaking time travel, it becomes a confusing, cluttered mess. And that's the biggest thing holding this movie back. Its story is a mess. It's not awful, but it is a mess. What do I mean by that? Well, let me tell you all about it after we get through the plot synopsis, shall we? In 1993, shortly after the end of his second year at Hogwarts during the second film, Harry Potter spends another dissatisfying summer at the Dursleys' house studying magic at night without being caught. While family vacations to Egypt and France respectively are being spent by his friends Ron and Hermione, both of whom he is determined to join in visits to the village of Hogsmeade, which is a class field trip for the third years. If he has either his Aunt Petunia or Uncle Vernon's signature on his Hogsmeade permission form. On the 31st of August, he gets the opportunity to do so as long as he hides his abilities from while Vernon's sister, Marge, arrives for a visit. However, at dinner time, Marge viciously insults Harry and his parents, calling James Potter a drunk and Lily's Potter, pardon my language here, but it's literally in the movie, a bitch. Yeah, it goes that far. This is the first Harry Potter movie to be PG-13. Which in turn triggers Harry's anger, and his unconscious magical powers cause her to inflate into a giant balloon and float away. Excuse me. That's one of the best parts of the movie. I do really like this scene where Harry does revolt against the Dursleys and revolts against all these horrible insults being thrown in his face. And not to mention, when the actual inflation itself happens, there's some great practical and CGI effects mixed in to make it look somewhat convincing. So, yeah, I do like that scene. It's pretty good. A livid Vernon orders Harry to put her right, but Harry says that she deserved it, and he's not wrong. Vernon then lunges at him, but Harry retaliates by pointing his wand at him. Vernon exclaims that Harry would not be allowed back at Hogwarts for using magic outside school, but Harry flees, expecting to have been expelled for using magic outside school anyway. After seeing a shaggy black dog, which we later find out is an animagus, the night bus appears and takes Harry to the Leaky Cauldron. There, Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge, played again by Robert Hardy, tells Harry he will not be expelled. Harry then learns that Sirius Black, who is said to be a supporter of Lord Voldemort, has escaped from Azkaban. Well, he more learned that on the night bus on his way there. And I'll talk about this sequence for a little bit, because for some reason it's not in the summary. The night bus scene's really cool. Not only because it has a really unique, interesting design, but it is very interesting. Not only in its design, both interior and exterior. I mean, giant purple bus. Yeah, you're not going to see that every day. But it's also the delightfully over-the-top cheesy characters that are on this bus, which are Stan Shunpike, the conductor, and then there's Ernie, the driver. We don't really learn a lot about Ernie, but all we know is that he's a bus driver and he loves to chew on bread. And then we have the freaking talking head. The talking shrunken head. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have great effects because the mouth barely moves while it's talking. But the words that comes out of his mouth are cheesy and just make you want to laugh. And then Stan is the one that tells Harry about Sirius Black. So, yeah, this part does have some really good purpose in the story, but it's also just interesting visually, especially if you're playing the Lego game, where you know that scene where it has to like shrink itself in between these two giant red buses. Well, in the Lego game, it has like all the parts swapping around on the bus to make that effect, and man, does it look cool. And then, of course, you have the old lady gag, and then you have Harry being smashed into the window a couple times for good measure. So, yeah, it's a pretty silly scene, but it kind of works, especially since most of this movie is so dreading in its atmosphere. And another scene they forgot to throw in here is Harry gets his new books, which Cornelius Fudge had brought there personally for him, which was nice of him. But the one book, the one for Magical Creatures class, is a creature in itself and tries to eat Harry's shoes. I don't mind this part. I think it is a little bit funny, but at the same time, why? I get it's called Magical Creatures, so the book is a creature. I understand that. But it just feels like an obvious, unnecessary excuse to have a jump scare. Because he picks up the book, he starts messing around with it, and then all of a sudden it tries to eat him. Like, you know those really crappy jump scares in horror movies that people are so sick and tired of? That's that scene in a nutshell. The book is a cool design. There are some funny moments, especially the noise it makes when Harry stomps on it later. But at the same time, like, what does it add to the story? Outside of a little context later on when Neville tries to open the book during class. Outside of that, it adds literally nothing, and you could cut it and miss nothing. And another weird thing I want to put in here that's also from the Lego game is that since that game's co-op, they had to have a second player in there. So they had the second player be Arthur Weasley, which is weird because Arthur's not in this scene at all. He's in the scene later when he goes out of his room and learns more about Sirius Black. So, yeah. Bit weird, but honestly, you could cut this scene out and not miss a whole lot. It's goofy, it's silly, and it's just a blatant, obvious excuse to have a jump scare, because this is PG-13, now we can actually do more scary things. Like, I'm sorry, that scene is just eye-rolling. Like, why? Why? The next day, Harry comes out of his room and finds a cat chasing a rat. Harry enters the pub and is reunited with his best friends, Ron and Hermione, and finds out that the rat is Ron's pet Scabbers, and he was being chased by Hermione's pet cat, Crookshanks. And Crookshanks the cat's adorable. I don't think any of us can disagree with that. He's also informed by Arthur Weasley that Black will likely come after him and warns Harry not to go after him no matter what. Harry's confused as to why he would look for someone who apparently wants to kill him. I mean, sound logic. Harry and his friends journey to the school on the Hogwarts Express, where they share a compartment with their new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Remus Lupin. I'll talk a little bit about Lupin. He's a really cool character. I like him. Not only is he a freaking werewolf, which is already getting points in my book, but he's also a kind, compassionate guy, and you can tell he didn't want to be stuck with this, but it reminds me a lot of Larry Talbot from the classic Wolfman series from Universal. Because he's a kind guy. He means well. You know he means well, but he has this monster inside of him that he can't control, and it slowly corrupts him. So, yeah. It's really cool. And I think David Thewlis, I hope I'm saying that right, does an amazing job with the performance. And he is, in my opinion, next to Sirius Black, the best character in the movie. And one of the best new characters in the Harry Potter series to date. Which makes it hurt all the more that since he's one of my favorite characters of this series, he's in the movie I rewatched the least. Bummer. Who's asleep when they enter? Abruptly, the Hogwarts Express is stopped halfway to Hogwarts and let aboard a Dementor sent by the Ministry in search of Sirius Black. The creature has a profound effect on Harry and causes him to faint, forcing Lupin to awaken and repel it with a Patronus charm, which we learn more about later in the movie. At school, famed Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore, now played by Michael Gambon since Richard Harris passed away before Chamber of Secrets came out, and unfortunately Michael passed away very recently this year from, I believe it was natural causes, may he rest in peace, informs the Hogwarts students that because Black has escaped, Dementors have been set up around the school as a protection precaution. The trio begin also a new class, Divination, taught by Sybil Trelawney. When they read tea leaves, Trelawney tells Harry he has the Grim. In addition to Lupin's appointment, Hagrid is announced as the new caretaker of magical creatures. Which I think is a cool way to give the character some extra screen time and stuff to do. Because, I mean, who doesn't love Hagrid? And him getting to be a teacher, especially considering what got him expelled in the first place, is really nice to see. It's cathartic. Unfortunately, it's taken away from him pretty quickly, but we'll talk about that later. And as for Trelawney, she's fine. She's just a little bit too over the top and kooky for my liking. Where else? Now it's just the new care management. Okay. As lessons begin, Hermione frequently arrives at their various classes, seeming appearingly out of nowhere. Lupin's lessons prove enjoyable as he teaches useful spells and helps less confident students like Neville with one of the funniest scenes in the movie, where they have to fight off this boggart that's a manifestation of whatever they fear. And the first one for Neville is Professor Snape. And then he gets around that by dressing Snape in his grandmother's clothing. And then Ron steps up next and has to contend with a giant spider. Again. But he makes it funny by giving it roller skates so it can't balance on the floor. And then there's a snake, and it gets turned into a giant Jack-in-the-Box clown. And then Harry steps up. And at first, Lupin thought it was going to be Lord Voldemort, but instead, it turned out to be the Dementor. So Lupin steps in, revealing his fear, the moon, which, I mean, makes sense. He's a werewolf. And then he ends it by using the ridiculous spell and turns it into a balloon and throws it back in the cupboard where it came from. I was thinking for the word. Cupboard, wardrobe, yada, 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 whatever. But that scene's funny, and it has a really nice, upbeat, jazzy track to it as well. So that's a really good scene in the movie, I will gladly praise. However, Hagrid's care of magical creatures class does not go as planned, as on the first day, Draco Malfoy, after insulting Harry for fainting from a Dementor, and also insulting Buckbeak, which was a really bad idea, deliberately provokes the hippogriff Buckbeak into attacking him. Which, I mean, he did that himself. So he kind of deserved that slash in the arm. But poor Hagrid, it was his first day on the class, and he already lost it. Man, What a bummer. And then to add insult to injury, his father, Lucius Malfoy, who we don't see in the movie, but this part is his involvement, successfully has Buckbeak sentenced to death by execution. Later, third-year students are allowed to go to Hogsmeade, but since Harry's Uncle Vernon did not sign his letter of permission, he can't go. He instead stays behind talking with Lupin on the wooden bridge, which I think this is the first time we see the wooden bridge in the movies, who says that he knew Harry's parents and that they were two great individuals and were great friends to him. And scenes like that do get me a little bit emotional because, I mean, this is a guy talking with the son of his friends about the dead friends and how much they meant to him. Like, scenes like that do get a little bit of your tear going in your eyes. Returning to the Gryffindor Tower, they find the Fat Lady's portrait empty, having been attacked. Dumbledore and the school caretaker, Filch, find the Fat Lady in another portrait completely scared. She says that Sirius Black has entered the castle and wanted to enter Gryffindor Tower. Dumbledore sends all his students to sleep in the Great Hall, in which Professor Snape says to Dumbledore that the appointment of a teacher may have been dangerous. Specifically Lupin. And I'm just going to say it right now here. This is more than likely these slash marks that caused this portrait to be ripped apart. That was not Sirius Black. I have a feeling that was Lupin wolfing out in the middle of the night. So, yeah, that's unfounded. Dumbledore denies this, though both think that Harry might be in danger. Later, in a Defense Against the Dark Arts class where Snape substitutes for Lupin, saying he's incapable of teaching, he teaches them about werewolves and animagi. An animagus is a werewolf who can turn into another animal by force, well, not by force, by choice, and change back into human form whenever they desire. They can only turn to one animal, though. So, for example, let's say, that Dracula is an animagus. Let's say, for example, he can transform into a wolf. So, he can only transform into a wolf, but not into a bat. You follow me here? Probably not, but that's basically the gist of it. If you're an animagus, you can only turn into one animal. This isn't friggin' Animorphs where you can transform into dozens of different animals. During a high-stakes Quidditch match where it's a terrible storm and there's thunder and lightning all over the place, several Dementors approach Harry while he's chasing the Golden Snitch, causing him to fall off his broomstick. Dumbledore slows his descent with a spell he calls Arresto Momentum. Harry wakes up to find that his broomstick flew into the Whomping Willow and got torn apart. So yep, that means the Nimbus 2000 that has been with Harry for 2 movies is now destroyed. Harry then decides to learn how to fight the Dementors. Lupin says he will teach him, but after the holidays, since he's not feeling well, because he, recently wolfed out. Sorry about that. I had to close my window because someone decided to start mowing their lawn. Whatever, let's keep going, shall we? Near Christmas, Harry attempts to sneak into Hogsmeade without permission, but is caught by Fred and George, because they know about his invisibility cloak and can see his footprints in the snow. Kind of like how the Invisible Man was thwarted at the end of that movie, where you could see his footprints in the snow, which made him visible for this one short time, giving them the opportunity. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. Let's keep going. Who give him the Marauders map so that he can enter the village through a secret passage. Let's talk about the Marauders map a little bit, because it's a really cool item. It's an item apparently that they stole from Filch, and it's by Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. And it's a map that literally shows, in their own words, anyone, anywhere, what they're doing every minute of every day. It's a really cool little thing. Not to mention it has a cool self-defense mechanism later when Snape tries to nab it. So, yeah, pretty cool little item. It's definitely one of those iconic pieces of Harry Potter lore, and it's a really cool thing in general. So, moving on. At Hogsmeade, Harry overhears that Sirius Black was his godfather after some shenanigans. Let's talk about the shenanigans a little bit. Sorry, I know I keep going off topic, but this is a very summarized version of the plot of the movie. So let's talk about the Hogsmeade scenes for a little bit. They're pretty cool. I like seeing more about these, and I'm glad that Harry finally gets to actually discover this Hogsmeade. And just like Harry, we didn't learn about Hogsmeade until this scene. Well, we learned about it, but we never got to see it visually. Here we get to see it visually, and it's really freaking cool. Like, they did a really good job bringing Hogsmeade to life from the books. It's bustling, it's happy, it's cheerful, it's unique, it's interesting, and it has some funny visuals, like Harry Potter walking through the streets undetected, but all you can see in the camera is this giant red lollipop that he steals from a kid. It's funny. And then, of course, you have the scene where Ron and Hermione are at this barbed wire fence looking over the Shrieking Shack, which is supposedly the most haunted place in all of Britain. Which pretty much confirms that the Harry Potter universe takes place in Britain, if the King's Cross Station thing didn't already make that obvious. And Malfoy comes down to try and insult them again. He calls Hermione a mudblood again, clearly having not learned his lesson. And so Harry throws snowballs and drags them throughout the snow, and it's hilarious. Like, he's in his invisibility cloak, and he just messes with Malfoy and his two compatriots. But for some reason, there's no Goyle. I found that scene really weird, because we see Crabbe next to Malfoy, but we don't see Goyle. We only see Goyle in the one scene where he's, taunting Harry with the Dementor thing with his hood up, like, ooh, making ghost noises. But for some reason, we don't see him in the scene where Malfoy is actually somewhat prominent. Instead, it's just this random other guy. Like, why? That's a bit weird. I don't know if I can't remember if it's like that in the book. I haven't read the books in years, but I mean, just feels weird. Why is there no Goyle in that scene? Why? It's weird. So anyway, let's get back on topic. Harry overhears that Sirius Black was his godfather after sneaking in, hearing his name whispered by McGonagall as she and Cornelius Fudge go into this tavern of Madame Rosmerta, and they have a conversation talking about how Sirius Black's a murderer, killed Pettigrew, all that was left was a finger. Sorry, I put up the wrong finger, I'm sorry. All that's left was a finger, and the big bombshell that Sirius Black is Harry Potter's godfather. And his parents' best friend. And apparently that he's the one that sold James and Lily Potter to Voldemort. Black is said to have divulged the Potter's secret whereabouts to Voldemort and murdered his mutual friend Peter Pettigrew. Again, all that's left was a finger. Stinking bags. An enraged Harry tells his friends that he's hoping that Black finds him so he can kill him, clearly feeling betrayed and angry. Not to mention he's a teenager with hormonal puberty and all that definitely messes with your emotions a bit. The holidays pass, and Lupin teaches Harry the spell to conjure a Patronus, a shield or force that can repel a Dementor. A Patronus is the opposite of Dementor, which breeds on unhappy thoughts and bad memories. The happier the thought used to cast the spell, the more powerful the Patronus will be. After a few attempts, Harry manages to create a Patronus. One night, Harry's using the Marauder's map and he sees Pettigrew's name. However, when following his name, he finds nobody, but is caught by Snape. Lupin appears and sees the map. He takes it from Snape and then ushers Harry away. And we'll talk about this scene for a little bit too. But you remember how I said earlier in this review that the Marauder's map had a failsafe for anyone else that wasn't Harry or wasn't actually knowing of its power? Here's where that failsafe comes in, as Harry decides to read off what it says on the thing, as Snape tells him, but it's an insult and directed directly at Snape. Mrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs offer their compliments to Professor Snape. And go on. and requests that he keeps his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. Like, I know he was just reading what the thing said, but it's hilarious. In his classroom, he tells Harry that it was irresponsible of him to wander around at night with the map in the corridors of the castle with a killer on the loose undetected. Which, I mean, he has a fair point. Before leaving, Harry says that the map may not be working properly. He had seen Pettigrew's name on it, despite the fact that he's supposed to be dead. Lupin says that's not possible, and stays looking at the map quietly, while Harry goes off to bed. In divination class, after everyone has left, Professor Trelawney enters into a trance in Harry's presence. Okay, let's talk about this scene for a little bit, because this is jumping around like crazy. There's another scene with Trelawney where they're talking about crystal ball gazing, and Hermione takes a guess at it, and then Trelawney decides to insult her right to her face, which of course angers her, leaving her to storm out the room and knock the crystal ball out of the room and down the stairs. So Harry finds it, Ron goes back off to his next class, Harry goes back to give it back to her, and that's where this scene comes in. She enters into a trance in Harry's presence and predicts that the Dark Lord's servant will return to his master that night. And this trance is never explained. It makes me wonder why they even include it at all. It makes no sense. Harry, Ron, Hermione then visit Hagrid to console him over Buckbeak's impending execution. While there, Hagrid gives Ron back his rat, which Ron thought was killed by Crookshanks, but it turned out he was alive and just ran off, who had disappeared earlier in the year, with whom Ron had believed to be dead. While the trio are chasing Scabbers when they're ushered out of Hagrid's house, and Scabbers bites Ron's finger and runs away towards the Whomping Willow, a black dog of some kind drags Ron and the rat into the hole right at the base of this Whomping Willow. And yeah, the dog grabs his leg and yanks. Like, it's vicious. Harry and Hermione follow after having a fight with the Whomping Willow, finding a tunnel leading into the Shrieking Shack. The dog is revealed to be Sirius Black, who is an animagus. Lupin arrives as well and embraces Sirius as an old friend. After being confronted by Hermione, Lupin admits to being a werewolf. Snape appears, planning to catch Black and Lupin and hand them over to the Dementors, but is knocked out by Harry's Expelliarmus spell after he borrows Hermione's wand, since he was disarmed by Lupin when Lupin burst into the room when Harry was about to kill Sirius. Lupin and Black explain that Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew in his animagus form. It is revealed that everything that Black was accused of was actually Pettigrew's doing, and the pair forced Pettigrew back into his human form. Lupin and Sirius prepare to kill Pettigrew, but are stopped by Harry, who tells them that was not what James would have wanted. In other words, he saves his dad's two best friends from becoming killers. As the group head back to the castle, the full moon rises, causing Lupin to transform into a werewolf and Pettigrew to escape, by turning into a rat once again. Lupin and Sirius fight in their animal forms until Lupin is distracted by a howling noise and runs away. Yeah, we'll talk more about this later. And Sirius and Harry are attacked by Dementors, as Sirius is suffering the Dementor's kiss, which sucks out his soul, which is hanging out of his mouth. Eerie visual. Dementors close in on him and Harry, who are ready to take Sirius's soul and take Harry as well as a bonus. Harry sees a figure in the distance cast a powerful stag-shaped Patronus, scattering the Dementors and saving both their lives. Harry soon falls unconscious next to Sirius, and both are motionless. Harry wakes up in the hospital wing, and Hermione tells Harry that the Dementors are going to kiss Sirius, and Dumbledore arrives. They tell Dumbledore that Sirius is innocent, and Dumbledore believes them, but warns them that no one else is likely to. He then cryptically tells Hermione that she may possess the means to save 2 innocent lives, and warns her to remember the rules, and 3 turns should suffice before leaving. Also saying that retracing your steps is a good spot to begin. Hermione reveals that she possesses a time turner, which is how she has been taking multiple classes at once. She and Harry travel 3 hours back in time, watching themselves go through the night's events. I hate The time travel in this movie. It's forced, it barely makes any sense, it's incoherent, it's forced, it doesn't fit, and it's just stupid. Because we had all these coincidences happening earlier in the actual scenes, which was already saying how, I guess by fate, Harry and Hermione just kept going back. Like each past version just led to another past version, which kept making the same timeline replay itself over and over and over again. Like, what the hell? And then on top of that, it also just doesn't explain anything, like at all. Yes, they set Buckbeak free and they, keep him from getting executed, so the executioner in anger chops a pumpkin. However, but still played out like Buckbeak's actually executed, which, well, he's not. You wanna know how I know? Because they had that freaking scene where Harry suddenly gets pelted by something in the back of his head, despite the fact that we haven't seen them go back in time at this point. Like, the time travel in this movie is fucking terrible. And it only makes an already super confusing plot even more confusing. So, seriously, fuck the time travel shit. It's the worst part of this movie by a mile. They set Buckbeak free, and they return to the Whomping Willow. They are pursued by Lupin in his werewolf form, because remember that howl that drew Lupin away the first time? Turned out that was Hermione. But how does it make sense when, again, we haven't seen them go back in time yet, and they're just all in this scene together, and we hear a howl? Are you leading me to believe that it's just a coincidence? The first time that there's a random female howl that draws Lupin away so he doesn't kill Harry and Ron and Hermione? What in the actual fuck? Seriously, fuck the time travel. It is the worst part of this movie. Because it makes sense. It makes no sense. It's incoherent. It's forced. It doesn't fit the rest of the story at all. And it makes the entire endgame of this movie feel fucking cheap as hell. Seriously, the final act of this movie is fucking balls. But they manage to get away from him by hiding behind a tree, but Lupin finds Harry and Hermione by taking another path and walks up behind them. Supposedly that was supposed to be a jump scare, and it has no effect whatsoever because you literally see Lupin right freaking behind them as he realizes that they're there. That's not how you do a jump scare, guys. As he charges towards them, Buckbeak comes to the rescue. He fights Lupin off while Harry and Hermione look on. It suddenly gets windy and cold. They see the Dementors flying above their heads. They rush over to the lake as the Dementors are about to attack the other Harry and Sirius. Let's talk about this scene too. So, Harry is saved by this stag Patronus, and he thinks that it was his dad. Somehow come back from the grave in his spirit, a lot like how his mother Lily gave him some kind of protection spell back in Sorcerer's Stone. I can buy that, because since the mother's love thing allowed to give him the touch to, disintegrate Quirrell, I can buy that his dad from the other world, from the ghost world, is able to come back for one brief moment, save his son by using his magic to make a Patronus, and save his son from the Dementors and save him from dying. Yes, I can entirely believe that. Which makes it all the more of a kick in the balls when you realize that it's Harry doing it, having manifested his own Patronus, and saying that he somehow witnessed himself doing the Patronus and somehow knew how to do the Patronus despite the fact that he already did. Fuck the time travel shit in this movie! It makes no sense and just leaves you confused and boggled, and feels like your mind's being fucked. Like, seriously. The time travel in this movie's fucking terrible, and it should have never been in this franchise to begin with. Just, time travel shit's fucking annoying in this movie. It's so bad. Harry realizes that the person he saw was actually himself, not his father, and he casts the Patronus himself to save himself. It doesn't matter, the fucking time shit's stupid. They save Sirius from the Dementors. Yada, yada, yada. Harry and Hermione make it back to the hospital wing just as Dumbledore leaves from Dumbledore's point of view mere seconds after he'd last seen them, telling them they'd succeed. Dumbledore feigns ignorance and wishes the two a good night. The two walk in just as their past selves go back in time, pretty much, again, confirming that this just keeps going on and on and on in an endless freaking loop, over and over and over again, and never stops. It's the same timeline, plays itself out in this other alternate timeline over and over and over and over and over again. What the hell? Just fuck the time travel shit. It's garbage. Moving on. So annoying. The two walk in just as their past selves go back in time, pretty much, again, confirming this loop just goes over and over and over again, non-stop, leaving Ron utterly confused as to what happened. Like the fucking audience! At the end of the year, Lupin resigns, knowing that people will not want a werewolf to teach their children. He gives Harry back the Marauders map, and later Sirius sends Harry a firebolt as compensation after somehow hearing about him losing his broomstick, which I assume Lupin must have told him. And that's the story of Prisoner of Azkaban. It sucks. It's incoherent, it's confusing, it's mind-boggling, and the time travel shit is an absolute asshole if I've ever seen one. And it almost single-handedly ruins the damn movie. Look, if you want to put time travel in a movie franchise that hasn't used it yet, that's fine. But just make sure you know how to use it and how to actually make it coherent and make sense. Otherwise, you end up with this clusterfuck. Like, why in the absolute hell did you think that was a good idea? It's not a good idea. It was horribly botched, and this movie was almost ruined by it. And you want to know how I know? Because they never bring this up again. Yeah, this whole time travel shit, it's only in this one movie. We get visions and flashbacks and stuff in the other movies, and flashbacks and stuff, that's fine. Or stuff like the Pensieve, which we see in Goblet of Fire, and then see used multiple times in Half-Blood Prince. That makes sense. This was just a lazy fucking asshole, plain and simple. And it almost single-handedly ruins the entire movie. It still has its cool moments, it starts out really well, but by the time the third act rolls around, I'm just done. I've lost interest. So, yeah, the story is the worst part of this movie because it's an absolute cluttered, confusing, tedious, mind-boggling, clusterfuck mess. Okay. We're moving on now. We're done talking about the story. The story's terrible. Moving on. Alright, let's talk about our cast. Daniel, Rupert, Emma all return. Then we have Michael Gambon as Albus, again, since Richard Harris passed away before Chamber of Secrets was even released. And the film's dedicated in his memory. And he does a great job. And he does a really good job as this slightly more serious Dumbledore. He does a great job still keeping that wiseness of Dumbledore. But he also has a bit more of an aggressive side to him. But it doesn't feel forced either. Like, it feels progressional. Like, he keeps getting older. He's going to become a little bit more irritable. Like, it makes sense. And it works. And I don't mind it. So, yeah, he's still really good in here. Then we have Maggie, Alan, Robbie, Emma Thompson as Sybil Trelawney. Not a big fan of the character, but the acting is okay. David Thewlis as Remus Lupin, I already talked about. He's amazing in this. Warwick Davis, Paul Bennon, David Bradley. Dawn French, Paul Whitehouse, Violet Columbus, Annalisa Bujolani, Tess Boucheron, Freddie Davis, Caridad Angus, Timothy Spall, Peter Best, Bonnie, Matthew, James, Oliver, Chris, Daniel, Equo, Alfred, Devin. Okay. I'm just going to move down here. Where's the... Sorry, I'm looking for the... There we go. Wizarding World Related. Here we go. let's talk a little bit about Gary Oldman as Sirius Black. As much as I love David Lewis as Remus Lupin, I'd say that Sirius is probably the better casting and the best part of this movie. Yes, I hate the time travel third act cop-out bullshit, but he's still a great character, and he only gets better throughout the rest of these movies, so... Yeah, I mean, it's arguably Gary's most well-known and iconic role, and he does an amazing job in this movie as this guy who's vengeful because he got wronged, breaks out of prison to try and make things right. And then he ends up being the godfather to Harry that he didn't get to be back when James and Lily were still alive, as he spent more time with James and Lily rather than Harry, because Harry was a baby. But yeah, and I do like all the scenes with Sirius and Harry. They're sweet, they're cute, and they have a nice emotional beat to them. So yeah, there's that. Let's see. And then there's a bunch of differences from the book. Now let me just scroll down here and find some trivia or some short section that I can read off to you guys. Sorry. Then there's a bunch of character omissions from the book. Here we go, reception. Prisoner of Azkaban has the dubious distinction of being, as of 2018, the lowest grossing film in the series, which I think makes a lot of sense. It was far from a failure by any means. It generated worldwide box office of $797 million US and is currently ranked the 41st highest grossing film of all time. Despite being the lowest grossing film of the series, it did earn notable critical general acclaim. It is the second highest rated film of the series, after Deathly Hallows Part 2 with a 7.7. Okay, I'll give you that. That score is perfectly fair. And an 82 out of 100 on Metacritic. Okay, that's overrated. Deathly Hallows Part 2 received an 8.1 and 87 score, respectively. Okay. So, yep, that's the trivia. Well, is there trivia? There's no trivia. Okay, that's weird. I thought there'd be some trivia, but not this one. Guess there wasn't a whole lot to this one. Outside of differences and whatever, but... Yeah, that's... all the analytical stuff on Prisoner of Azkaban. Let me talk about my personal overall opinion of this movie. I'm conflicted. This movie is really good. Don't get me wrong. This movie is really good. But, man, whenever I hear someone say it's the best of the series, I just roll my eyes. Because I cannot at all agree with that. Especially when the third act sucks so bad. But... outside of that, the writing is still mostly good. You have the great acting. You have great writing. Writing's still great. You have a great opening scene. You have great effects. You have decent storytelling. You have some great emotional moments between characters. You have some more horror elements thrown in there, which I think they went a little bit too overboard on, in my opinion. And the Dementors are cool. They add more to the lore. That's pretty much where the positives end. Because the second half has a severe pacing issue. It either moves too fast or too slow. And, like I said, the biggest problem with this movie, that's enough to knock it down 3 whole numbers for me, coming off the heels of Chamber of Secrets, is how straight up, flat out, undeniably bad the final act of this movie is. It is bad. It feels lazy. It feels cheap. And the time travel shit is absolutely mindfuck. It's mindfuckery at its absolute most obnoxious. And it just always pisses me off every single time I see it, because I'm like, okay, you want to throw time travel in there? I'm cool with that. But make it coherent and make fucking sense. This made no sense. The time travel in this movie made no fucking sense. I'm sorry, I know I've already said a bunch of other times in this review, but I need to emphasize it. The time travel in this movie makes no fucking sense. And I'm sure it was done much better in the book. Again, I haven't read the books in years, so I can't comment on that right now. But what I can comment on is this movie in general, and in my opinion, this is still my least favorite Harry Potter movie. Yes, say what you want about Deathly Hallows Part 1, that it's a giant exposition dump leading into Part 2, but at least it felt coherent and had an actual purpose. This was just a clusterfuck, and it has really good things about it. It's still a really good movie, but at best, it's one and done. It doesn't have much rewatch value. And again, that third act almost completely ruins the whole fucking experience. I can understand if it's some of your favorites because of some of the scenes in here, but me personally, no. It has always been among the weakest of the franchise, and hearing that it's the lowest grossing of the bunch actually makes me feel a little better. This movie's still pretty friggin' messy, though. And because its story is so bad, and because the third act sucks so hard, I can't call this movie great. As much as you probably want me to because of how much I overpraise the ever-living hell as Sorcerer/Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. And you guys know, in that Chamber of Secrets review, I said I really love the dark horror stuff they threw in there. But have a balance here! If you want to be overly dark, be overly dark. If you want to be whimsical and magical, be whimsical and magical. Chamber of Secrets is that lightning in a bottle that was able to balance both. This tries to go this direction, and in turn it makes all of this seem inconsequential and completely pointless. This movie's just frustrating. That's the one word I can use to describe it. It's frustrating. It's very good. I can still recommend it, but I can't see people calling this the best of the franchise. I'm sorry, I can't. As much as I try, I just can't. So, because of that, I'm going to give Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban a final verdict of a disappointing and unfortunately tough love, harsh, low 7 out of 10. It's a really good movie. I do recommend you see it, and it is essential to the lore of the series. But its story is just so cluttered and confusing, and the time travel final act is absolute ass. And those two things are enough to drop it to a 7 by default. So, yeah, that pretty much sums up all my confused, hot take thoughts on Prisoner of Azkaban. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry for any of you I may or may not have angered in the process. And if you like this more, if you love this movie, continue to love it. This is nothing more than my personal opinion. And in my personal opinion, this is still the weakest of the entire franchise. Yes, even over Fantastic Beasts. Well, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time for the much more positive review of my third favorite movie in the series with Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire.